sarvopalambo pashamah prapancho pashamah shivah nakvachit kasyachit kaschit dharmo buddhena deshitah anirodhamanutpadamanuchedamashashvatam anekarthamananarthamanagamam yah pratitya samutpadam prapancho pashamam shivam deshayamasa sambuddhastam vande vadatam varam nasvato napi parato nadvabhyam napyahedutah utpanna jatu vidyante bhava kvachana kechana. Welcome everyone back to our Dharmapada class. We discussed the 5th verse of the Dharmapada last time, which I will repeat today because perhaps not everyone was present last time. The Buddha says that hatreds are never pacified through hatred. Negativities are never pacified through more negativity. It is through non-hatred, non-negativity that they are pacified. This is Sanatana Dharma, he says. Esa Dhammo Sanantano. This is the eternal Dharma. Victimizing oneself, seeing oneself as a victim, he said in the previous section, is the worst possible strategy. This is very interesting because in the 21st century, based on the psychological movements of the 20th century, we have a tendency to see ourselves only as the victim of others. For example, no doubt we will have had a difficult childhood, but to conclude that because of that difficult childhood, the rest of our life now has to be a mess, is in fact a development of the 20th century. This will surprise some of you, but if you have studied the origins of modern psychology, you will see that it has in fact shaped modern society. The notion that my current state of mind is because of what my parents did to me or my school teachers did to me is really a development of the 20th century. Ancient people didn't think like this, and because they didn't think like this, their psychology was really different. And what the Buddha is saying here is, don't do that. Don't blame your parents or your teachers or your older siblings for your current state of mind. Don't do that, he says. Rather, take responsibility for your current state of mind and realize that by completely forgiving everyone, you actually purify yourself. You heal yourself. You do not heal yourself by continuing to blame the others. Now, what is very important is sometimes when I talk about this, people say, but does this mean I have to ignore and forget what happened? No, no. If you were present in the previous sessions, he says that you should indeed acknowledge that the hurt occurred. But after acknowledging that, don't hold on to the feeling inside you, but utterly forgive, completely forgive, and then let go. And it is here that the next verse continues. As is the ancient tradition of India and Asia in general, one repeats the original verse and then the translation. So I will repeat it in the language of the Buddha, Pali, which is like the Scottish of ancient India, similar to Sanskrit, but not identical. The Buddha said, Parecha navijananti, maya methaya mamase, ye cha tattha vijananti, tato samyanti medhaka. Although others may not understand it, we nevertheless understand that we can control our mind. For those who really understand this, their conflicts come to an end. I will repeat this. Although others may not understand it, we nevertheless understand that we can control our minds. For those who really understand this, their conflicts come to an end. And there's a beautiful story told by the commentator. There is a famous commentator by the name of Buddhaghoṣa. It is a beautiful name. It means the sound of Buddha. So the commentator's name was the sound of Buddha. And he was in fact from Sri Lanka. This might be interesting for you. He was a great monastic scholar, and many people consider him to have been enlightened because some of his explanations are very profound. So he was not just an ordinary commentator. And Buddhaghoṣa tells us a story which probably was historical and was transmitted down to him. He says that once the Buddha was staying with some of his monks and nuns at Kosambi. Kosambi is not so far from modern Ayodhya, those of you who know Indian geography. And in this location, his followers had already segregated into two groups. There were those who loved the rules that the Buddha spoke about. These rules are called the Vinaya. And I'll give you an example. One of these rules is that you're not allowed to eat after 12 o'clock. It's an interesting rule. The Buddha said that if you eat solid food after 12 o'clock, your body becomes really heavy. So after 12 o'clock, at noon, not at midnight, not snacking chips at midnight. We're talking about 12 o'clock at noon. The Buddha said you shouldn't eat heavy food because your body becomes heavy, and it is much healthier for you to eat only very light things like juices and perhaps some very light things. And it is interesting because some of the great dietitians of modern times tell us actually that you shouldn't eat heavy food towards the afternoon and late in the evening, and that is the healthiest. So clearly the Buddha understood something about diet. It's quite interesting actually. But now interestingly, his followers made this into a rule, the Vinaya. Thou shalt not eat after 12. No food, not even a smoothie. You know, they might check, is the smoothie too heavy to eat or to drink? Is it still a drink or is it food? Right, so you get these kind of people, isn't it? Like the vegans. I'm also a kind of vegan, but you see the vegans, they make a rule out of it. You see, that's the difference between an insight-based diet and a rule. So the story goes that there were already two groups among his followers, those who had the Vinaya, the rules as rules, and those who were based on insight and who said, well, you know, it makes sense to keep the rule, but if someone is hungry at 2 o'clock, well, what's the problem? Let him have a smoothie, or let him have I don't know, a snack, you know, like a samosa made by Nutan Ben or someone, or Neelam. I don't know if you can cook Neelam, but if you can, it's a good quality. And of course, also Adityaji and others, not only Neelam. So if you're hungry at 2 o'clock, what's the problem? Have a samosa, but don't overeat, right? So the second group took the approach, these instructions of our teacher are meant to give us a kind of, you know, guideline towards insight, yes? And this phenomenon of having people follow rigid rules, and the people who say, but this is not a rule, this is an insight that we are free to adopt and free to experiment with. This exists in all the traditions of meditation. And in fact, I would say, this exists all across the entire spectrum of religions, whatever it is. You have these two groups, isn't it? You have the people who make it a rule, and you have those who understand the insight behind it. And now, interestingly, the story goes that these two groups in Kosambi were quarreling with each other. Because the one with the rules was saying, you evil people, you don't understand the rules, you're not following the rules. And the other group was saying, oh my goodness, these rules, oh my goodness, these crazy people, the fanatics, right? So, and then the Buddha came to know about this. And now the story is this, that the Buddha couldn't stop them from quarreling, so he left. And he spent the rainy season, the Chaturmasya. These are, you know, sort of 4 months in India, which are considered the rainy season. And during this period, the Buddha said, it is better not to travel so that one doesn't harm the animals. So he spent this time in a forest called the Rakita Grove. And there, it is the beautiful part of the story, there he made friends with an elephant. The elephant was called Balileya. And the elephant used to come and stay with the Buddha. And then the lay disciples, these are the people who are not monks and nuns, you know, who are ordinary people, who are family men and women, and the lay people in Kosambi, they came to know that the Buddha left for the forest because his disciples were quarreling amongst each other. And then the lay people, the householders who used to give food to the disciples, to the monks and the nuns, stopped giving them food. Because they felt, because of these people, the Buddha left. It's like you have a master and the master leaves the WhatsApp group, right? That's sort of the modern version of this, that because the disciples don't, really understand the master says, you know what? I'm going to leave the WhatsApp group. This is exactly what the Buddha did. He says, you know what? I can't deal with these people. And he went to the forest. And then the disciples who had jobs, the householders, they stopped giving food to the monks and the nuns. So essentially the monks and the nuns started going hungry. It's quite funny, isn't it? So I don't know if it was that funny, but slightly funny. So then, at least it's funny to me because it's 2,500 years ago. Please don't mind, because some people have complained about my humor. I think it's funny. If you don't think it's funny, that's all right. So then they went to the disciples, to the nuns and the monks, and they said, please, we want the Buddha back. We actually like the Buddha here with us, close by. And they said, can you please go and apologize to the Buddha for your behavior? And then the disciples understood, and they went to the Buddha and they said that, can you solve this for us, this conflict? And this is where Buddhaghoṣa says, this is where the Buddha made this statement, that although others may not understand this, we, meaning we who know this teaching of observing the mind, of observing our emotions, of observing the fact that negativity never solves negativities. We understand this. So even if others don't understand it, we can do it, isn't it? We can't point the finger at others. The change needs to begin with ourselves, the Buddha said. And there was another interesting gentleman, Mahatma Gandhi, who said the same thing, that the change needs to begin with us. How can we point the finger at someone and say, they're always quarreling, how stupid are they? I hate them. When we do that, we are the ones who are engaging in negativity. Do you see this? So the Buddha then solved that situation by telling them, look, even if someone else doesn't understand the teaching that you can actually observe and dissolve your negative emotions, you can understand it. So Neelam, if we translate this to a modern world, supposing you have quarrels with your boss, I don't know what profession you are in, supposing your boss is a really difficult person, he comes in the morning and he says, Neelam, where's my coffee? And you say, well, sir, it happens to be COVID time and the Starbucks has a huge queue of people, therefore I couldn't get your coffee, and then your boss becomes really agitated. So Neelam, when you become agitated by your boss's behavior, the Buddha would tell you, but Neelam, dear, he doesn't understand this teaching, that you can observe your emotions, that you can dissolve your emotions, that you can give rise to maitri, to loving kindness, that you can forgive your boss. He doesn't understand this, but you do, Neelam. So if you get agitated by your boss, you are the one at fault. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Even if your boss is a really, really difficult person, if you are getting riled up by that, I don't know if this is an English expression, it is spontaneously in my mind, riled up by it. If you are letting yourself get agitated by this, you are the one at fault in the Buddha's teaching. Because you, Neelam, are the one who knows the teaching. You know that you can observe your mind, that you can take a deep breath, you can go to another room, you can witness your emotions, you can understand, my boss is ignorant of this teaching, he's just really a difficult person, and he's not a happy person. I remember that Ayumu told us about his boss also not being a very nice lady. And it's a similar situation, isn't it? That if we get riled up by others and then blame them and we feel ourselves as victims, well, we are at fault in the Buddha's teaching. This is called taking responsibility for our own states. Do you understand this? By not taking responsibility for our own states, we are prolonging those states. We are prolonging the negativity. Healing happens instantly when we connect to that innermost dimension in us, which the Buddha later in this beautiful teaching calls the luminous nature of the mind, the prabhasara chitta, the luminous mind, the shining light of our own mind. This is what comes out when we practice maitri, metta in the Buddha's language. And my dears, it really is your decision if you don't do that. Then you are the one who is prolonging your suffering. Yes, your parents were difficult. Yes, you were terribly mistreated. Yes. But now, these are your states. Therefore, you must take responsibility for them. You can dissolve the negativity. And by continuing to blame others, you are prolonging that, you see? Highly essential to understand this. And those of you who think that I'm being very repetitive, well, I'm sorry. I'm just teaching you what the Buddha taught. All right? So then the next teaching is in the context of two disciples. This is again the story by Buddhaghoṣa. There were two disciples. One was called Mahakala and the other one was called Chudakala. And the reason I tell you these stories is that these are quite unknown stories, even though they're so ancient and even though they're so well known in the Buddhaghoṣa's commentary, no one knows these stories. So it is very valuable to tell these stories, especially because I think that many of these stories really were historical. You see, that the early Buddhists, they transmitted these stories down. Therefore, to know about these stories is excellent. So there were two brothers. One was Mahakala and the other one was Chudakala, and they were both merchants originally. And on one of their business trips, they had the chance to listen to a discourse given by the Buddha himself. This was in the region of Shetabya. This is probably some town in maybe Western Bengal or something like that. We would have to do the exact geographical research. And Mahakala was so inspired by the Buddha's teaching that he said, I want to become a monk. I want to join this beautiful man. And his brother, Chudakala, however, he felt worried about this because Mahakala was his business partner, and Chudakala feared that he will not be able to continue the family business in the same way if his brother leaves. So Chudakala, with the permission of his parents, also joined the monk group around the Buddha, but his real intention was to bring his brother back into the family business. So Buddhaghoṣa then says that Mahakala was extremely dedicated to his spiritual practice of meditation, and this might scare some of you. He used to do his meditation in a cremation ground where people get burned who die. Why? Because Mahakala really wanted to remind himself of impermanence on a daily basis. And what better way to do that than to sit on the periphery of a cremation ground where every day people bring their loved ones who have died. And then he can witness how they are burned, because in India, it is the tradition to burn you when you die. And I know it sounds a little scary, but it is quite a good idea, isn't it? So I like to go to a park where there are some birds and parrots here in our town. And right next to that park is the place where people get married. And daily there are weddings taking place there. And it's so nice. So you're sitting here and I have my mala, which I can't find anymore. I've told my wife that where is the mala? I can't find it, but I always go there and I do my spiritual practice there. So in front of me are the birds and next to me people are getting married. So that's so beautiful, right? It's so nice. You can appreciate the beauty, you can appreciate the joy. But Mahākāla did the opposite of this. He went to the periphery of the cemetery, I mean the cremation ground, not the cemetery, cremation ground, where people are burned. So he did sort of the opposite of what I do, but I understand him, I really do. And then they say that he became an arhat. This is a term that all of you should remember. Arhat is someone in the Buddhist tradition, someone who has attained the first level of enlightenment. There are 4 levels of enlightenment in the Buddhist tradition. So he became an arhat very early on in his practice. This is quite surprising, but this is what they say, that the Buddha was such a powerful teacher that people relatively quickly attained the level of an arhat in his presence. And his brother, Chudakala, on the other hand, had a very strange intention. He actually wanted to bring his brother back into the family business. So one day, the Buddha and his followers, including Mahākāla and Chudakala, they came to the forest called Simsa near this Shetabya town. And there, the former wife of Chudakala, so this is now the tricky brother, his ex-wife, not ex-wife, his former wife, invited the Buddha and the disciples to her house for lunch. And Chudakala went and helped her to prepare the seating arrangement. So interesting. And then the story goes that Chudakala, on the request of his wife, his former wife, changed into lay clothes, into normal clothes. So instead of having the robe of a monk, he changed into normal clothes because his former wife felt embarrassed that he was helping her make the seating arrangements. So she told him, why don't you change into normal clothes? And then the Buddha came there and saw Chudakala in normal clothes. And he sort of didn't say anything. And Chudakala stayed at home again and became a normal householder again. So in modern language, this would be like Ayumu becomes a follower of the Buddha. He becomes a monk. And then the Buddha and Ayumu, they come to London. And then Yuka says, you know what, I want to invite you for lunch. And then Ayumu dresses in Calvin Klein jeans again, and then stays like that, right? That's the idea here. Well, I don't know what you wear. Maybe you have a Louis Vuitton belt, Ayumu, I don't know. But so this is the point here. So then the next day, the ex-wife of Mahākāla, the brother, who became enlightened, the first stage of enlightenment, also invited them for lunch because she had come to know from Chudakala's wife, hey, I invited them for lunch and my ex-husband stayed with me, right? So this story is so mean to women, by the way. If you read through the lines, right, it's the women's fault, right? But this is not the end of the story, you will see. So then the ex-wife of Mahākāla also invited them. But strangely, Mahākāla didn't change his dress. He also came to make the seating arrangements. And then later, the Buddha even told him that he should stay back and help her wash the dishes, right? So here you can see it's not against women. He would help her wash the dishes, which sometimes my wife also complains that I don't do that when we get guests here. then she has to wash the dishes afterwards. Why? Because I'm giving my monologues with chai and coffee, and she has to do the dishes, right? So this is, that's why I think this is a really historical story, because this is exactly probably what must have happened. So the Buddha told him, hey, stay at home and wash the dishes, help her wash the dishes. And then afterwards, the disciples complained to Buddha and said, Buddha, Chodakala stayed with his ex-wife, and now you also said Mahakala should stay and help her. Why are you doing this? In this way, our community of disciples and monks and nuns is going to fall apart. Because now a trend will arise where all the ex-wives and the ex-husbands are going to invite us, and then we will all stay at home, and then your whole community of monks and nuns is going to get destroyed. And then the Buddha said, don't you worry, don't you worry. And this is where he gave the following teaching. This is now the verse. Subhanupasim viharantam indriyeshu asamvutam bhojanam hi chamattanyum kusidam hinaviryam tam ve pasahati maro vato rukkam vadubbalam. And I will also read the next verse because they go together. Asubhanupasim viharantam indriyesu asusamvutam bhojanam hi chamattanyum saddham aradhaviryam tam ve napasahati maro vato selam vapabbatam. So the Buddha says that someone who is occupied with experiencing only pleasant things, who has no control over his senses, who does not understand moderation in food, who is lazy, who has no strength, no courage. Desire overwhelms such a person like the wind overcomes a weak tree. I'll read once more. Someone who is occupied with experiencing only pleasant things, who has no control over their senses, who does not understand moderation in food, who is lazy, and who is without strength, without courage. Desire overwhelms such a person like the wind overcomes a weak tree. And then the next verse. Someone, on the other hand, who is not occupied with experiencing only pleasant things, who has good control over their senses, who understands moderation in food, who is firmly committed and has abundant strength and courage. Desire can never overwhelm such a person like the wind can never overwhelm a mountain. This is the teaching. So now you see, Chodakala, the brother, is the first type of person who, in fact, only is interested in experiencing pleasant things in his life, or has, who has little control over the senses, who is not really committed to the path of the Buddha, who has little strength, little courage. So he is like a weak tree, and then desire comes up. Oh, I'd like to, I want to watch my Netflix series. I want to have my Coca-Cola or my red wine or whatever it is, which is fine. Nobody's speaking against that. But then because of that, eventually gives up the path of meditation, gives up the path of understanding their own mind, understanding their own emotions, understanding how negative emotions, feeling oneself to be a victim, how that actually leads to suffering, how anger, irritation, jealousy, obsession, how all these things always lead to suffering and troubles. But if we're not ready to dedicate ourselves to practicing meditation, practicing the Buddha's teaching of Maitri, Metta, of observing our body, our feelings, our thoughts, our mental contents, insights, then 100% we are going to be like weak trees swept away by the wind, by a storm. The next little difficult situation will sweep us off our feet. The next conflict with our family members will sweep us away. The next tragedy that happens in our life will sweep us off our feet. You understand? So these are the two types of people. Those who really practice. The path of the Buddha has 8 stages. That's why it is called the Eightfold Path. We will talk about this in a lot of detail as we go through this Dharmapada. Those who really understand, yes, it's true. I can observe my emotions. I can observe my states. And when I truly observe them, when I truly recognize them, when I recognize anger, when I recognize hurt, when I recognize jealousy, envy, pride in me, it actually dissolves when I really do it. And when I then give rise to Maitri, loving kindness, where I wish everyone true happiness, where I bless everyone in some sense, like a mother embracing her only child. This is what the Buddha said. Then everything gets better. And with time, I even become free of suffering altogether. And I become free of having to go through this cycle of birth, disease, becoming older and then dying. And then again being born, again becoming older, again becoming ill, diseased and dying. And again being born, and again becoming older, again going through another life, another stress, another husband who is a nuisance, who never wants to work. You see all that again and again and again. This is the teaching of the Buddha. This is not a one-time thing. If you have a difficult life, the Buddha says, well, my dear, this is not even a one-time thing. This is going to happen again if you don't realize your true nature. If you don't realize the mind's true nature, the true nature of consciousness, which is luminous, radiant, free, absolute love, absolute compassion, absolute kindness. You see? So we have done 2 verses, and I think we can stop here and then do some question answers. You can write them in the chat if you like, or you can speak them however you feel comfortable. Please, as always, keep the questions about the subject, about the mind. Don't go into politics, because we will just all go crazy and we will be upset. And then we are not following the teaching of the Buddha that we should not go into negativity. Yes? So please, whatever questions you have, fire ahead. You can also write them privately if you don't want to be exposed, and I won't name you.
Namaste, my name's Jedna. I have a question for you.
Yes, Chaitanaji.
I have come across a situation where I have not known what to do. I practice Maitri and Karuna consciously whenever I can. But I've witnessed a situation in the garden where I see two creatures. There's a food chain happening. One has to eat the other in order to live. So there comes a question, do I stop that situation from happening, or do I let it continue and witness nature takes its course? This has been a difficult situation to observe, but at the same time, I have had to walk away and let it happen. Any guidance would be appreciated.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I know this very well. It's a difficult one. There are ancient stories about this as well, that there was a king, Shibi. And interestingly, the Buddha was quite clever. The Buddha said, that was me. You know, this was an ancient story. And he said, this King Shibi, that was me in a previous life. You know, so the Buddha sort of integrated everyone who lived before him and who did wise things. And he said, well, that was me anyway, right? So it's quite clever. So this King Shibi, there's a story that he went out into the forest, and a falcon was hunting a pigeon. And the pigeon took refuge with King Shibi and was hiding behind the King Shibi. So King Shibi protected the pigeon. And then the falcon said to King Shibi, hey, this is my food you're protecting. It's my right to slay this pigeon and to eat it, right? So this is exactly that situation, Chaitanaji. So then the story goes, now I'm just telling you the story. Please, nobody do what is told in the story, okay? The story is that Shibi cut off a little bit of his own flesh and told the falcon, you know what? Why don't you have this as your food today? Because today I would like this pigeon to remain safe, because today I have been able to protect her. You understand? So if we take this story, but now please, none of you, please don't start cutting yourself, all right? If you do that, then we will be sued, right, at Sarvamangala Foundation. So, but you see, this story tells us how the ancients saw a situation like this. Chaitanaji, if it is in your power at that moment to stop the violence, you should stop the violence. That's the message. That's also what I do when I see a cat, because we live in, you know, there's a forest right next to us. When I see a cat who is about to pounce on an insect, then I try to make sure that the insect is not harmed. And I try to go to the cat, make it go away. But it is only in that moment that it's in my power, Chaitanaji. That doesn't mean I will now open an NGO to protect insects against cats. That would be crazy, right? So this is called contextual compassion, Chaitanaji. And from my studies and my own practice and my own insight, that is what the ancients were practicing, contextual compassion. Where, when it is in your power to avoid the violence, you do it, but not by using violence, Chaitanaji. So the idea is not that you're going to hit the cat. That would be crazy. That means you are inflicting violence upon a being in order to avoid violence, right? That's crazy. That's like the vegans who tell others at the table, you're evil. They are inflicting violence upon the others when they say that. You understand? We could say, well, I don't want to eat anything that hurts others, but, and having said that, be quiet and be a nice human again. But you see, most of the vegans are telling others you are evil, and they're ruining the day for the others, right? So that is violence. That's not the teaching of the Buddha. It's also not the teaching of anyone who practices compassion or meditation. So this is called contextual compassion. Yeah, does that help you, Chaitanaji?
Yes, it surely does. It definitely does. I was very unsure, but I think from this guidance I can take a lot. Thank you very much.
And we can translate this such a situation to any kind of conflict, not only between creatures. What do we do when family members are in conflict? What do we do when colleagues are in conflict? What do we do when we see injustice? Right? So clearly we can't do that much. This is the issue sometimes, that, or yeah, Risa, I can give you an example. I was walking through town last week, and we have this passage in the town where it says only people walking, no bicycles. And there was a lady with her child, and she had two children. One was in the pram, and the other one was 4 or 5 years old. And a gentleman, quite a fat gentleman, a huge belly. I don't know how he was able to be on his bicycle. It was quite surprising. But in any case, he was, sort of going like this because he was riding on his bicycle. And I don't know if it was his weight or what the reason was, but he almost crashed into the child. So then the mother told him, "Sir, you're not allowed to ride a bicycle here." And then he started shouting at her angrily. I'm not going to use the insults he used, but, very bad language. And he told her, sort of, stick to your own, what you're doing. Don't tell me what to do, And he was shouting at her. And then the lady said, "Hey," so they got into conflict. So now this is such a difficult situation because, first of all, I witnessed how he almost crashed into the child. I saw it. Secondly, he was being mean to a lady. Thirdly, well, what to do, right? But then I'm not a policeman. And is it really my role? Should I really aggravate this man now and tell him that it's not right? So this is called a dilemma, you understand? And then I sort of, my witnessing capacity is quite fast, right? So I was witnessing. And then what happened? This huge man turns around on his bicycle and comes back to the lady. And then, Chetnaji, this is where my compassion rose, right? And it rose into an energy of protection, because clearly I could witness he's about to either verbally attack her or physically attack her. So then I thought, all right? And then sort of the Krishna's Dharma comes, which is where you protect those who are weaker. So then I said, all right, I will wait for a moment now. And as I was witnessing, he came up to her, and then you could see, and this is where you see a man, especially a huge fat man, is a lot stronger than this lady. And I could see, oh, this is getting very, very strange. So then I just stood there, and you see, I wouldn't say I am fat, but I'm quite large as well. So then I was just standing next to the lady. I didn't shout at him, but I stood next to the lady so he would understand he can't attack her, right? I just stood there, and then he went on and said, I'm not going to tell you what he said. And then I was witnessing my own emotions, right? And I could see my heartbeat was getting faster, and I could see my breathing was getting faster, right? Because then this is a natural situation, right? It's quite instinctive. I was witnessing. I wasn't hyperventilating, but I could see that it was going up. And then I told him, "Sir, shall we go to the police? There's a station right here. And you know what? We could ask the police if it is allowed to ride bicycles here in this passage, because, sir, as far as my eyesight can see, there is a sign there that says you can't ride bicycles, but maybe my eyesight is wrong. So why don't we go to the police? Let's ask the police, because clearly they must know better, right?" So, and because I said this in a humorous way, Chitnaji, he was, "Huh, what? Is he making fun of me or what?" But because I also used the word police, you understand? So he said, "Blah, blah, blah," and he went away with his bicycle, right? So Chetnaji, if I had become aggressive, I'm going to fight you, right? So I'm going to protect this woman, you know, like in a Bollywood film, right? मैं आपको मार दूंगा and all that, right? So then what would have happened, Chetnaji? Then, of course, the lady would have liked me afterwards, and my wife wouldn't have liked that. But you see, because, you know, in the Bollywood films, they always like those who save them, isn't it? Right? So I'm just joking. but you see, he might have become aggressive, actually aggressive. So Chetnaji, I think the solution is always some kind of conflict resolution, right? Where you try to balance the situation. And Chetnaji, my experience is that humor is the greatest tool to diffuse conflict. Humor. Always use humor if you see conflict. Say something funny, even if it's about yourself. Say something like, you know, if you observe two colleagues, they're fighting, say something like, you know what, I just peed myself before. This is so embarrassing. I went to the toilet and I peed myself. Can anyone help me? I'm just joking here. But if you do that, you diffuse the conflict. People would just, what? She peed her, what? Right? And then the whole conflict is diffused. And I personally believe that if the Europeans in the 20th century had had a little more humor, like we have in India, or we used to have, if they had had a little bit more humor, we wouldn't have had world wars. Really, I genuinely believe that. Because Churchill and Hitler would have joked with each other instead of fighting each other. Yeah, I'm just saying this. I know that it's a little, you know, harsh to say this, but please understand, when you have humor, you don't continue conflicts forever. You don't. You laugh at yourself and you say, yes, we are lazy. Yes, we are. You know, you're humble and you can laugh at yourself. So Chetnaji, if you use compassion combined with humor, combined with wit, combined with conflict management methods, you know, there are actually seminars about conflict resolution seminars. I am sure you will have much greater success in life at diffusing conflicts, and you might even become a really good politician, you know, so who knows? So then someone asks, why would you not want to seek pleasure and avoid negative experiences? Please, could you clarify how we approach this? There is obviously a difference between seeking to fulfill desires all the time, but why would we not try to limit negative experiences or suffering if we can? You see, this question is sort of like a straw man. Nobody ever said this. So the why would you not want to? There is a problem with this kind of question because nobody said this. So in fact, true meditators enjoy life much more than non-meditators, really. Because non-meditators are swept away with every negative emotion they have. Every negative emotion that arises becomes the cause of suffering, whereas a meditator is never swept away by a negative emotion. A meditator, you see, I just described it to you. I could see that coming up in me, but instead of going along with it, I diffused it by making a joke. I told him, come on, let's go to the police because I'm not sure if my eyesight is right and I'm not sure what this sign really means. So I'm just giving it as an example where I could feel that coming up in me as well. The heartbeat becomes faster, the breathing becomes faster, right? But a meditator, my dear, observes, witnesses that very fast. This is called very fast witnessing, fast vimarsha, fast vipassana, witnessing very fast. Joke. And then it's gone. The negative emotion is gone, finished, right? This is the teaching here, my dear, that negative emotions never lead to the solution of a negative situation. This is the teaching. Not that you shouldn't enjoy, on the contrary, you can then truly enjoy. For instance, let us say you have the worst possible day. you failed an exam. They told you that they need to let go of you now because of COVID. And by the way, this is actually happening to people. I'm sure you're aware of that. People are losing their jobs. So you've lost your job, you failed an exam, terrible things happening, I don't know what. You really have two possible ways of reacting to that. Either you go into a negative spiral where you let your negative emotions get the better of you, and you will go into a spiral where either it leads to depression, or you can't sleep, or your heartbeat will never stop being like that. And this is also very real, my dears. People can sometimes not sleep because of the anxiety and the tension and all that. So this is the negative spiral. And the Buddha is telling us, my dears, the negative spiral never leads anywhere. It doesn't lead anywhere. Or you can react differently if you know how to observe your states, if you know how to witness your states, if you have absorbed some of the wisdom of Buddha, and you know, hold on a moment, this is a state in me, this is an emotion in me. Yes, it is true that I don't have a job, it's true. But the emotion in me is my emotion. I can witness this emotion. I can sit down and meditate now. And if I sit for half an hour, 48 minutes, the Buddha says 48 minutes is an excellent time to practice. If I really sit for 48 minutes, witnessing the rising and the ceasing of my breath, the rising and the ceasing of my emotions, of all my thoughts that come and go, this state of my emotion can't stay for 48 minutes. If I really sit it can't, it's impossible. And anyone who says it stays for 48 minutes simply hasn't done it. This is the infinite truth that I can guarantee. You simply haven't done it. That's why you're saying it doesn't work. If you're actually sitting for 48 minutes, witnessing the state, it is impossible for that negative emotion to stay. It is not possible, really. All right? And moreover, the Buddha doesn't just say to witness the state. He says, once you see that the state loses its power, loses its hold over you, and is slowly dissolving, you then give rise to maitri. You give rise to metta. May I be truly happy. May I be at ease. May those who have caused suffering be truly happy. May they be at ease. You see? And that maitri gives you energy. And then with radiating inner joy, you go to the computer and you find a new job. And then when you are invited to the job interview and you are shining with maitri, isn't it obvious that they're going to choose you for the job? You know, I'm sort of talking simplistically here, but by generating positivity, isn't it obvious that people will tend to give you the job rather than if you're looking like this, and you can see it on your face that you're always angry, you're always grumpy, you don't like anybody, you look like a vampire, you look like Lord Voldemort, right? I mean, they're not going to give you the job, right? I love Harry Potter, by the way, right? So if you look like Voldemort, they're not going to give you the job. I mean, it isn't obvious. So if you're shining, if you're happy, if you're full of kindness, you're radiating kindness, of course they're going to prefer you. And even if that one job is not the one you will get, if you try 15, 20 times, the probability that they will take the one who is full of joy, full of kindness, radiating energy and positivity is obviously higher than they will take the one who looks like, right? So please, I mean, these things are obvious, aren't they? That's why you should work on positivity. Even if you don't believe in deities or you don't believe in Buddhas, no problem. But work on positivity. No one wants to work with someone who looks like, I hate everyone. You need to give me a job anyway. No one wants to do that, please. Okay? And then we'll soon finish. One person asks, in the story where we resolve conflicts and let go, as the others may not be aware of these teachings, and we are the ones who understand these teachings, how do we strike the balance between being aware of not belittling others due to their ignorance of these teachings versus we being able to understand the teachings and resolve conflict? Yes, well, the Buddha says that pride comes before a fall. So if you see this sense of we know, we here, these 30 people, we have the great wisdom. We are the masters, and all those stupid people out there, they don't have a clue, right? So this is the mentality of cults, right? This is a cult mentality that where we know and they don't know. But this is actually pride. So the Buddha says pride is the worst of all negative emotions. So if you have pride, you're not following the teaching. So the answer, my dear, is, well, then you would have to note and observe your pride. You're actually just proud. You're not implementing the teaching. You think you have the teaching, but you're actually using the teaching for a status upgrade, right? You're using it to raise your profile. I used to be ignorant and stupid. Now I am ignorant and stupid and I know the Buddha's teaching, right? So that's just silly. That means you're not following the teaching, all right? No one who follows these teachings belittles others except in jest and in a joke. So I'm always belittling others. No, I'm not, but I'm always joking, right? Because, well, what else can we do in COVID, right? So we can only laugh. If we don't laugh, what are we going to do? We'll cry. So I prefer to laugh than to cry. But of course, yes, you're right. We should not belittle anyone. Absolutely. Because when we do so, it means we ourselves just have pride. And that means we will end up in suffering the day after tomorrow. Because pride comes with certain consequences. When we have pride, it also means we want the admiration of others. Everyone who has pride wants the admiration of others, really. You know, there is a connection between pride and wanting admiration. And when we don't get that admiration from others, well, that means we will suffer, isn't it? So all these inner emotions have consequences. This is really what you all need to understand, my dears. Also the previous questioner. The point are not that these emotions are bad. This is not the point. It is not that we're trying to say, bad boy, you had pride. This is not the point. These emotions have consequences. There is a direct link between anger and suffering. Anger and depression are linked with each other, my dears. People who have a lot of anger then become depressed, really. Even modern psychologists know this today. There is a direct logical link between anger and depression and dissatisfaction and not being satisfied in life. There is a direct link between pride and seeking adulation and admiration and then being hurt when we don't get it. You see, there is a direct link between these things. So the Buddha's teaching is simply, you need to understand how these inner emotions are linked with negative consequences, suffering. And once you realize that, you begin to dissolve these negative emotions. Now, this man I talked about, the big one on the bicycle, who I don't have a shred of belittling him, even though I told the story in this way, I don't have a shred of belittling him. If I met him tomorrow, and if he doesn't remember me, I could go and have a coffee with him. Why not? And we can talk about how to read road signs or something like that, right? So you understand, but the point is not that I'm belittling him. I'm talking, I'm putting the story like this so that you laugh, so that you have some entertainment, because if I only told it to you in a dry way, you wouldn't show up, would you? Right? So this is the point here. But these teachings never mean that we are belittling somebody. The moment we are belittling, we are the most stupid of all. If we belittle others, we are the most stupid of all. So is that an explanation? Yes? So yes, we're way over time. I'm sorry. So let us finish here and then see you again in 2 weeks. I hope you enjoy these teachings. I hope you don't mind the jokes. The only purpose of the jokes are to keep you here, because you wouldn't stay here if I talked about this for an hour without joking. All right. So thank you. And may everyone be happy. Enjoy your weekend. Be kind to others. Don't belittle others, and enjoy. Namaste and Hari Om.